Yeah, so I had on the agenda that we were going to recap a little bit about yesterday. I also have the TED Talks from Swapna we can share, and I have the pre-recorded message from Tuberville's office, one of his staff members. So like to go ahead and start that. Does anybody have anything they'd like to just briefly say about yesterday? Or I know we're going to hear from Eric again this afternoon. He's always got great information.
Yeah, I was fascinated by the VR that they're supposed to check on themselves. I was able to do one of my projects was get information out in the community, and we have a little country market out here, and so I spent a Saturday and really was able to help a couple of families. But one guy, as soon as I said, "Have you ever checked into vote rehab?" It was terrible, the expression on his face. He said, "I have dealt with him for over 10 years. So I gave him an ADAP brochure. So I don't know if he followed through or not, but I mean, I've heard of other parents, but I mean, this might be something that really needs to be considered and looked at. And I would be willing to help. That was very enlightening.
Yeah, maybe even doing some surveys and everything and getting information out across the state and everything. That would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Especially get some background information first and everything and going forward.
Yeah, like collecting the stories.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
James, did you have your hand raised?
I think he was giving a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And we are all in agreement anyway.
Yeah, so can y'all see the screen with Swapna?
Yes.
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 All right, let's see if you can hear it.
10:54 p.m., June 18th, 2014. It's a timestamp I will never forget. It was the last image I saw before being put to sleep on the operating room table to undergo a small intestine organ transplant. 10 hours prior, my dad and I were at the Cleveland, Ohio Botanical Gardens, and on our way out, we saw the butterflies at the butterfly house. I took the pictures you see before you. Upon exiting the gardens, my phone rings. Swapna? Yes, this is her. This is the Cleveland Clinic. We have small intestine for you. Would you like to accept them? Wait, what? You're kidding, right? No, oh my gosh, this is for real. I have to tell my dad, hold on. I tell my dad, and in shock and in excitement, together we say yes. I share this story because butterflies, they're a symbol of metamorphosis, change, transformation. 10:54 was the beginning of a life-changing journey. Seeing the butterflies and then getting the call was no coincidence. What happened that led to the transplant? What has happened in the last 3 years after the transplant? How, at 27 years old, having undergone a total of 63 surgeries, am I standing before you today explaining how I found my purpose? Well, in 1989, I was born with an intestinal birth defect called ileal atresia. It's an intestinal malformation. I wasn't born with all of my small intestine. And as a 2-day-old baby, I had my first surgery, where the surgeon salvaged what he could and saw that the remaining part of the small intestine was severely dilated, enlarged. It was physiologically and anatomically inadequate. From birth, I became dependent on IV nutrition called TPN, or total parenteral nutrition, from a central line in my chest. I also received nutrition from a feeding tube that went directly into my stomach, called a gastrostomy tube. The nutrition is called enteral nutrition. I received the IV nutrition 12 hours a night, anywhere from 3 nights a week to 7 nights a week for 27 years. I received the enteral nutrition 16 hours a day, every day for 20 years. I received most, if not all, my calories from these two sources. I ate just for taste. Eating like a bird, not finishing full meals, eating the same snack or drinking the same drink for hours at a time. But these sources of nutrition have their own risks and complications, as severe as deathly infections and organ damage, liver failure, kidney failure. For us, the goal was to maximize oral intake. The goal from the beginning became no more IVs and tubes. It was my dream. To be ahead of short bowel syndrome, my family became informed. We stayed up to date on the latest research, pioneering through new surgeries, treatments, medications, diets, taking the risk, exhausting all our options, trying again, never losing hope. I had a routine growing up of unhooking and hooking up IVs and tubes in the morning and evening. I wore 2 backpacks. My first backpack was my nutritional backpack, with my feeding tube, formula, and a pump. My second backpack was my academic backpack. Like a true turtle, I would go to school, just like my peers. With my backpack on, I would participate in extracurricular activities, including varsity tennis. My backpack, my health, they were part of me. I was determined not to let them define me. I hardly shared any details to friends, extended family, and teachers. My backpack, part of short bowel syndrome, and like many other rare diseases, is an invisible disease. The only visible part was the backpack. Teachers regularly would ask me, "You can take off your purse, you can take off your backpack and go sit down, we're about to start class." And only then would I tell them it's connected to me and trace the path of the feeding tube. I hardly shared any details. I was silent because I thought all of this would go away one day. I didn't have anyone to look up to that had IVs and tubes. I had no other patients, no peers. I was the only one with this backpack. I thought surely by the end of middle school, this would all go away. Middle school came and went. Surely by high school, this would all go away. High school came and went. Surely by college, this would all go away. College came and went. My parents, they had to be as informed as the doctors. They read up on literature, not settling for the statistics, having faith that their daughter would defy the odds. My parents are in the audience today, and they deserve all the credit. I'm only able to stand here before you and share my story of perseverance because of their unwavering support and their own passionate fighting spirit. In college, at the age of 20, I had a series of experimental surgeries at 2 different centers across the US. With surgeons in retrospect, we could not anticipate my complex case. I developed severe complications that led to more surgeries, that led to more complications called fistula. Fistula are abnormal connections between hollow spaces in our body. I had 4 fistula from my skin connected to my small intestine, to my large intestine, that were also connected to my bladder. I would urinate food and bile. The same food and bile would drain spontaneously onto my skin. I would go to restaurants with friends just to have their company, to to have the social aspect, thinking I could just have soup. I would end up in the bathroom, agonizing in pain, flushing cold saline, trying to get any relief. The acid from the vial was leaving me raw, both physically and mentally, and more alone than ever before. Not only did I have short bowel syndrome, but I also had these extreme complications. Again, was there anyone else? As a family, our fighting spirit was dwindling. We thought we could not control much, and there was little we could do on our own. I wanted to give up. I was tired of being sick. I was tired of being in the hospital. I was jealous of my friends who were able to move on while I continued to be readmitted to the hospital and endured the same complications. I told 2 family friends, I give up. No more. I'm not doing this anymore. To my surprise, they said, that's fine. Give up. I was shocked. They didn't call a psychiatrist. They're not kneeling at my bedside praying for me to think otherwise. They continued to say, you can give up for now. A light bulb went off. I had a transformative moment, if you may. I realized it was okay to be angry, sad, frustrated, even jealous of those so lucky to be on the other side of the hospital bed. But it was imperative to not get stuck in those thoughts. Instead, to focus on what I did have control over and use that mentality of what can I do to move forward. During this time period, I was pretty much bedridden. There wasn't much I could control, and I didn't really have quality of life. But I relished in the fact that I could breathe on my own. I had control of all 4 of my limbs. I could walk on my own. I could bathe on my own. I could not get dressed on my own, but I could wash, dry, and style my hair on my own. And ladies, you know how important that is. The spirit can be redefined with good hair. Those glimpses of livelihood help me move forward. Focusing on what we do have control over, my parents and I realized we need to find the best doctors in the world. We put my health in our own hands, and like many rare disease patients have to do at times, we traveled around the country seeking second opinions from super subspecialty care. We drove 12 hours to one end of the US, flew thousands of miles to the other. In these doctor's visits, we found that my options were limited to extensive surgery and most likely a small intestine transplant. But my option of a small intestine transplant is no walk in the park. It has immense risk. The survival rates are low. I had to accept death as a real possibility. I had to understand that this was not a cure, but rather it could be an exchange of one set of problems for another. It was a personal decision. On June 3rd of 2014, I became active on the transplant waiting list, and just 15 days later, I got the call at the Botanical Gardens. I'm 3.5 years post-transplant tomorrow, and I stand before you having defied the odds. I'm alive. I have quality of life. I have reached milestones I have fought my entire life for. I can eat to my heart's desire, without pain before, during, or after the meal. I don't have a feeding tube anymore. And 1 year after the transplant, for the first time in my life, I achieved the milestone of no more IVs and tubes. But in the midst of these highs and these milestones, I've had complications that cannot be ignored. I've had bacterial and fungal infections requiring more surgery, a precancerous condition thankfully we caught early and required a couple weeks of chemotherapy, a restart of the IV nutrition, the TPN, to gain weight and maintain hydration. And most recently, just last year, bilateral hip replacements. No, I do not want to endure these complications one more time. And no, I do not wish them on my worst enemy. But I'm grateful for their occurrence. After the transplant, going through these complications, again, I felt alone. I was lost. Were there any other patients? I wanted to talk to somebody. Those that I did talk to had not experienced these issues. But I thought, surely there's somebody out there that I can relate to. I took the problem in my own hands and started a support group for intestine and multivisceral transplant patients on Facebook, not knowing where it would lead to. We now have a growing community of patients and caregivers that get the support I longed for during my recovery. And I've made it a point to meet other patients. I now have met other patients with the same diagnosis, with short bowel syndrome, even here in Huntsville. There's not many of us, but we have a community that we can call on. And I've met other rare disease patients. Our diagnoses may be different, but we share similar experiences. Together, we don't feel rare. Together, we don't feel alone. There's a power in numbers. Together, we have a voice. A rare disease is a disease that affects less than 200,000 people. 1 in 10 have a rare disease. With that statistic, 30 million Americans are diagnosed with a rare disease. That means almost 500,000 just in Alabama have a rare disease. I can no longer be silent. Yes, as a child, I thought all of this would go away. Poof, disappear. I would depart into the world of the healthy and live like my peers. But in these past 6 years, I've realized that living with an illness is as much part of living as any other experience, even maybe more so. And the scars of 63 surgeries have taught me simple truths. To appreciate where I am today, to value the energy I do have, to respect how far I have come, and to ask myself, what do I have control over? What can I do? There's a lot I can do. No, I can't do splits, but folks, my hips don't lie. I saw and experienced the need of the rare disease patient. I saw the gap. I don't want anyone else to feel alone. There's a need for a community in our state. So today I lead the Alabama Rare Disease Coalition, a grassroots movement created by rare disease patients and caregivers to offer support to families, to educate the general population, to bring awareness to our needs, to advocate for necessary change. Just in the last year and a half, we've been able to host advocacy events at the state capitol in Montgomery with great participation from legislators and patients and caregivers. And just this past spring, we passed legislation at the state level to create an Alabama Rare Disease Advisory Council. A core group of advocates worked hard to see it come through. It's a working body of all stakeholders that have direct contact to policymakers in our state. I have gotten to see patients meet other rare disease patients for the first time, to talk to people and see that they get it, to find that community they've been longing for. I now live in DC and work for the National Organization for Rare Disorders, not only getting to advocate at the state level, but also at the federal level. Just this last week, I was on Capitol Hill giving the patient impact to staffers about upcoming legislation that would change the lives of short bowel syndrome patients as well as other rare disease patients. My purpose is to share my story, to make sure no one else feels alone, to improve the patient experience. I ask each of you, in the midst of hectic life, to not ignore your hardships, but rather look at them in a different light, to focus on what you do have control over, to respect how far you have come, to understand what you can do with the time and energy you do have. Because when you do, I promise you, you will gain a euphoria, an unparalleled commitment to live your purpose. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. I'd like to do Emily McBride from Tommy Tuberville's office. She recorded this for us, so we will listen.
Any and all comments you may have on those topics. It is very important to hear straight from you.
Sorry about that.
In Washington. Hi there, my name is Emily McBride and I'm Senator Tuberville's legislative assistant handling health, education, labor, and pensions here for that committee that he serves on in Washington, D.C. I am honored to be included virtually in your programming today for the federal legislative session as part of the Partners in Policymaking Alabama program. As I'm sure you have all been discussing, interactions between constituents and federal congressional offices is incredibly impactful. And as staffers, we rely on information from you all directly to help inform Senator Tuberville about how federal decisions are playing out in the lives of individual Alabamians and their families. I also understand that you all are discussing the overall process of how legislation is created at the federal level, and the most important part of that process is the flow of information from the constituent level up to the policymaker level. To that end, our office welcomes input from any and all of you, and you can feel free to do that in a variety of ways. Senator Tuberville's website, tuberville.senate.gov, has a portal where you can send a message or a request for a meeting to our office. You can also call us in DC or any of our regional offices. Those phone numbers are available on his website as well. Senator Tuberville serves on 4 different Senate committees, and one of those is the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. We have been very active in that committee over the past year or so since he began up here, and the committee has held multiple hearings focused around disability policy and ways to address disability workforce and employment from the federal perspective. It's a very important issue, and we certainly welcome any and all comments you may have on those topics. It is very important to hear straight from you. I hope that all of you participating today know how important your interest is and how valuable your voices are. Senator Tuberville and our staff look forward to a continued partnership with you all, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to send this message today. Keep up the great work.
So I think Pippa Warriors, we have another prospect to write some letters to. I think it would be great. I'll share her email with everybody and we can send her a message of thank you for participating. Like we heard yesterday, even that recorded message, she's engaged, she knows about our program, and you can start that networking and building those relationships with her. So I know the next part of our program, we're going to hear from a staff member at Representative Adderholt's office. So we're looking really forward to that.
That sounds really good to hear.
Yes, and I know several of you had asked about SWAPNA's TED Talk yesterday, and I pulled it up. I know there were a few overlaps with what she discussed with us yesterday, but like she said, she's a very powerful speaker and has a great message for us all. And she's here in Alabama today. She may go back to DC or go somewhere else. So I know, thank James and Nancy for representing ADAP this morning and finding some of these great speakers that we've had this weekend. They've been very, very instrumental in that. Great lineup.
Happy to do it, Linda. And when we see that Craig joins, I will, I'm happy to do an introduction and try to kind of initiate the discussion that we had talked about.
That'd be great. Any other comments from yesterday that stood out to you?
Well, I'll just say I hope people feel like the folks who joined us from the National Disability Rights Network, I hope that was helpful. You can see that each of them has a really focused area of expertise or kind of a collection of issues that they mostly work on. Eric, the last speaker yesterday and the person who will join us today, leads that office. And I really would encourage people here to feel free to follow up with Eric and others as a resource. I think I put something in the message box yesterday, but I'll just give you one concrete example. Several years ago, when it was proposed that one of our funding streams be zeroed out, we got support in Alabama, worked with NDRN, and were able to preserve that grant to do some of the disability advocacy work that we do in the state. So I would just give you that as a concrete example of the work that we're doing. I see that as we approach 10:30, I don't know if that's you, Craig, at KTK, but I'm thinking maybe. So Linda, I'm happy to proceed as we know that Craig has joined us.